Well, let's bring in our panel now, and I'm joined by the Institute of Public Affairs Chief Economist and Senior Fellow Adam Crichton and author at The Spectator, Terry Barnes. Welcome to you both. Terry, I'll start with you. The ABC's New Year's Eve broadcast has again come under fire. I always find social media really commentary, but they were criticising things from the music lineup to the timing of the midnight countdown. What did you make of the coverage?
I'm going to have to make a confession here, Jaimee. I think I had absolute confidence that the coverage was going to be CRAP. So I went to bed at 10:30, was asleep by 11 and didn't wake up till the morning. I saw the highlights of the fireworks, which were spectacular. But in terms of the coverage, I did sort of see snippets online today, and look, it's tired. It's just the same old year after year. A bit of ABC patting on the back, self-congratulation. But really, I mean, you can see tribute acts at a pub that are better than what they served up last night.
I mean, look, I was a fan of Melanie C, so I didn't mind seeing her on there, but people kept saying, am I watching a 2000 version of welcoming in the new year? But Adam, I compare last night's scenes of our harbour and people camping out overnight or very early in the morning, and I was then watching today's New Year celebration for New York. People in Times Square arrive at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and they're not allowed pass outs, so there's no access to any bathrooms, and the adults are wearing nappies, or you just hold on the entire time. And I thought, gee, in Sydney we're quite luxurious. We at least offer portaloos. Would you go and brave freezing conditions standing in a nappy to bring in the new year?
No, certainly not. I mean, I lived in the US for 4 years and I certainly never bothered to do a New York New Year's Eve because the weather, of course, is just awful. And, you know, of course, in Australia, we're so spoilt, at least in Sydney, with our fireworks. So they just aren't that great, really, in New York. I think it's much better to stay inside and be warm. But just on the ABC's coverage, just briefly. Also, I thought it was very odd on the Spice Girls that we had that basically taxpayers were paying for a foreign presenter, a foreign singer. But it should have been Australian acts, I think. But ratings are falling, I think, on the ABC, so it matters less. I think people are using social media, using Sky, of course, to see what's going on. So, yeah, it matters less.
Well, still on the coverage, Adam, what did you make that Play School made an appearance? I thought it was odd, especially because it was on about 9:45 and most kids are asleep.
Odd. I mean, well, look, Play School is an Australian institution, I think. I mean, I watched it when I was a kid. 60 years is a very impressive milestone, but I don't see why it had to be celebrated on that evening, and certainly not at 10 o'clock. So, the quality of production is obviously declining there at the ABC.
Well, Victoria is now officially in its election year, and both leaders today, we could say they unofficially launched their campaigns on social media. Let's have a look at snippets from both.
I'm looking forward to hearing from you on what you want for your future and what it means to you to be Victorian. It's going to be a big year, and I'm full of hope and excitement on what we can achieve together.
We've done so much together in 2025, delivering real help with the cost of living, opening new schools and hospitals, and transforming the way we move around our great city and state, with the Metro Tunnel and the Westgate Tunnel both now open. There's more to do, so I know that 2026 is going to be another big year.
All right, Terry, we've got Jess Wilson, who's really looking into the future and her messaging, while Jacinta Allen is reminding voters of what her government has achieved, although probably not surprising that she failed to mention the now high crime and huge budget blowout in her address. But what do you see as the biggest hurdle for Jess to jump over in order to win this year?
Well, first thing, I think Jess Wilson's doing really well in presenting herself as a new leader of Breath of Change for Victoria, and certainly she's talking the right talk. We saw it there in that grab. But certainly it's a big hill she has to climb in terms of winning 16 seats in a 90-odd seat parliament. That's a huge ask. But what I haven't seen from Jess Wilson, and particularly from her team, is that they have done and are doing the hard yards on policy, actually coming up with an alternative vision and an alternative plan for Victoria. It's one thing to say, as you have to do in opposition, this is what the government has failed to do. At this stage, I think Victorians are crying out to know that there is a viable alternative, that the opposition has some real ideas about fixing the state, but particularly the budget, particularly the economy, but also in small things like fixing the potholes in our roads. And I reckon if Jess Wilson wanted to have a winner, she would have a pothole fixing program that would be actually low cost but high political impact. And look, they really have to work hard. They've spent 3 years really faffing about fighting each other and tearing each other apart. They're showing signs of unity for the first time in ages. If Jess can actually make them work hard, keep them together and keep focusing on the government rather than on themselves, she's got a shot.
Adam, what are your thoughts going into this year's Victorian election?
Well, look, it's certainly a very important election. I mean, it's a very important state. It's a quarter of the national economy, and the election is still 10 months away. Jess, I think, has a chance to win. Actually, I think we see so much volatility now in polls, in states, in federal elections, that it's quite possible to win back those 16 seats. The Labor government here is very much on the nose. Clearly, they've been in power for 12 years. I think the legacy of Dan Andrews is more and more tarnished as time goes on, and I think more people are realising that. And of course, the fiscal situation is just diabolical. I mean, we've got debt that's heading to $200 billion, and this is a state of only 7 million people or so. That's a huge burden, and that also makes it very hard for the opposition to actually promise anything, because they can't really cut taxes because the debt will blow out even more. But they have to do something to appeal to voters, and Labor is very, very good at politics. So I think the biggest challenge for the opposition is that Labor's very good at politics, and they will make the right sounds and noises.
Well, Terry, you go, Terry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but I think this is where the opposition really should show that they're prepared to do the Winston Churchill thing. You have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat. If they're prepared to show that they, like Jeff Kennett, are willing and able to clean up the mess that Labor is going to leave them, they have a real shot.
Just a slight disagreement on that, if I may. Well, I don't think voters really care as much about debt and deficit, sadly, anymore. And so I think that just doesn't appeal. What I would do is just cut taxes and just let the economy grow out of the debt, or at least try that. But, that's a call she's going to have to make in the next 6 months. We'll see what she does.
Well, Adam, just while we are discussing economy and budget holes, John Howard and Peter Costello have said that the failure to restrain government or federal government spending and a lack of productivity driving economic reform means future generations are going to be saddled with higher debt, slower growth, reduced competitiveness, which is going to ultimately result in living standards falling. What do you make of their comments?
Well, they are perfectly right. I mean, the Australian economy is almost a basket case really at the moment. It's shrunk in 10 of the last 13 quarters. GDP per capita has shrunk. That's a terrible record and basically unprecedented in Australian history for many decades. Inflation's 4%, real wages are going backwards, and yes, government spending has grown at the fastest rate in recent years since the 1970s, since the Whitlam era. Basically we're swapping places with Argentina, if you like. We're kind of becoming the Argentina. We really have to be careful, and I think the Labor government federally has just spent far too much, and they haven't shown enough discipline, especially on the NDIS, which is growing at something like 7 or 8% a year. It's going to cost more than the armed services soon, and no one's really talking about cutting it. So there's far too much social security, far too much welfare, and also tax rates are just so high in this country. 47 cents is a very high rate at $180,000 a year, and that's not indexed either. So smart young Australians are leaving. So there are many, many things they have to do, and they're right.
Well, Terry, the Australian Jewish Association is calling on Jewish groups to block Labor ministers from community events, and this is over their decision not to call a federal royal commission into the Bondi massacre. What do you make of this move?
Look, I think the AJA is a very sound organisation, and their CEO, Robert Gregory, is a very decent man. But look, I don't think they should do that, to be honest with you. I think it's important that Labor ministers, Labor MPs are actually exposed to the grief, the pain of Australia's Jewish community. As a non-Jew, I find it easy to understand the anger, but I find it's a lot harder to understand what Jewish Australians are actually feeling. I think Labor MPs need to understand that, Labor ministers need to understand that, and a certain Prime Minister needs to understand that. But when it comes to this, I think it's a bit like Jackie Kennedy, after President Kennedy was assassinated, when she wouldn't change her pink dress, you might remember that. When she wanted people, what she said was, I want them to see what they have done. And I think that's what Labor ministers need to see now.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on there. Terry and Adam, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.